Today on TOKKANTE, I'm talking about the German brand Hanhart. So that's a German word that everybody should feel confident to pronounce correctly. So that's +1 already. And the three main reasons why you should be considering this brand if you're in the market for a vintage reissue chronograph. So I'll be going over a little bit of history first for those of you who are not familiar with the brand, and then I'll give you my analysis or my opinion on the three main reasons why you should be considering this brand, using two of their reissue models, the 417 ES and the Pioneer Mk1, as an illustration, but not as a review. So let's get into it. Hi everyone and welcome, I'm Ben. So let's go over a little bit of history first, and if you're already familiar with the name Hanhart, then you most likely already know its history, and you should probably skip to the next chapter in the timestamps down below. But if not, I'll give it to you in a nutshell. So the brand was started in 1882 in the German-speaking region of Switzerland, in a town called Dissenhofen, if my German is somewhat passable. But then, in 1902, basically they moved to the southern region of Germany, the watchmaking region of Germany, and eventually in 1934 they would move production to the Black Forest, and that's where they are still today. And the brand is actually still independent to this day. So in 1924, the son of the founder, who was a sports enthusiast, actually released the world's first affordable mechanical stopwatch. Up until that point, stopwatches were only manufactured in Switzerland. They were very rare, very hard to get by, and very expensive. So that was from that point on that Hanhart was associated with chronographs. In 1938, Hanhart released the German first chronograph watch, actually, the caliber 40. And that one you might have seen because of the iconic red pusher at 2 o'clock. So for the backstory, for the legend, this is supposed to be the fiancée of one of the soldiers who was going to the war, and then when he was leaving, she gave him a kiss, and then she painted the pusher with her nail polish. And this is why it was red. Whether true or not, I mean, most likely it was painted red by the brand so that people wouldn't press it by mistake. And until this day now, it's a trademark of Hanhart, the red pusher. Of course, now it's made of ceramic, but it still keeps the same shade. So during the war, Hanhart produced a chronograph and supplied the German, the naval officers and then the pilots of the Luftwaffe. And then after the Second World War, Germany wasn't allowed to have an army, a military. So in 1953, Hanhart released a caliber 42. So the 40 was the monopusher, 41 was the two-pusher chronograph. Caliber 42 was a flyback. And then in 1957, when the German armed forces were created, then Hanhart supplied caliber 42 in the form of the 417 to the German armed forces. So it was the first pilot chronograph for the German armed forces, and this is why this has become a legend as well. Originally they only produced about 1,000 of those, and only half of them, the ES, were in stainless steel, and the other half were in chrome-plated brass. And those are actually extremely rare and usually in very bad condition because brass is a soft metal. After that, 57 to 62, they supplied the German armed forces for about 5 years. And after that, Hanhart refocused again its production on stopwatches and became Europe's largest manufacturer of stopwatches for sport events, for car races, and for schools as well. And then fast forward in the 70s, they created actually a quartz movement that was produced in the millions and that saved them from going bankrupt. And in the late 90s, Hanhart restarted their watch collection and re-released some of their older model. And then in 2011, so about 10 years ago, they relaunched the Pioneer collection, which was based on reissues of caliber 40, 41, 42. So the first reason to consider Hanhart chronographs is that they offer very good value for the money, with above standard quality of finishing and also very good movements for the money. So Hanhart, produces chronographs both in their Primus contemporary collections as well as in their Pioneer collection. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on because this is where we find the vintage reissues of both the 417 ES as well as the caliber 40. So I think they are very affordable and yet without compromise. So for example, the Pioneer Mk1, which is the reissue of the Caliber 40, goes for 2,040 euros on the manufacturer's website. And the 417 ES, which is obviously the reissue of the 417 ES, goes for 1,790 euros. And keep in mind that if you're located outside Europe, you should in theory be able to get the VAT back, which makes them even cheaper. So I've handled a Hanhart before, Pioneer, not the Caliber 40 reissue, it was a different one, but no matter, you can tell that the finishing is very good for the price. I mean, we're not talking about AP level of finishing here, but keep in mind, you know, 2,000 euro or less, this is actually very good, and they look much more expensive than what they are. The delineation between, you know, brush surfaces and polished surfaces is very good. If you go on YouTube and you watch reviews of both the Pioneer Mk1 or the 417, you'll see that most people will tell you that the finishing is actually surprising and very good for the money. And it's all in the little details. If you look, for example, at the minute hand, it is curved to follow the curvature of the crystal. Now, Hanhart said that they manufacture, you know, some of their tools and also some of their parts directly in the Black Forest production site. So I don't know, they're not saying which parts of the watches they actually manufacture, but it is good to know that actually some of it is really actually made in-house. Now, if we look at the movements, if we take, for example, the Pioneer Mk1, so this one coming at 40 millimeter is 15 mil thick. It is quite thick, but that's because it uses a movement with a base Valjoux 7753, but on top of that, it has a module developed by Lajoux-Perret. So this module was developed in order to keep the monopusher at the 2 o'clock position like the original one. So they went these extra steps to produce a reissue that was true to the original with the monopusher not exactly in the middle of the lugs and the pusher and the crown at 3 o'clock, but really a little bit up. So that required, you know, some re-engineering by Lajoux-Perret. So Lajoux-Perret, if you don't know, it's actually a pretty high-end movement manufacturer that is now owned by the Citizen Group, and that is making movement for brands that are many times more expensive. So they made movement for, you know, Tag Heuer and Hublot or Arnold and Son, for example, and many others. So, you know, this is not an in-house movement for the Hanhart, but it is as close as you will get to an in-house for this price. So for 2,000 euro or under, you're actually getting an exclusive movement or module, at least, that was developed for this watch. So this is quite great. And this one I forgot to mention has a power reserve of 42 hours. If you wanted to get a monopusher from another brand, you will be paying quite substantially more. For example, I was able to find the Longines pulsometer monopusher chronograph, which goes on their website for 3,800 euros. So being able to offer a monopusher for 2,000 euro, again, is quite very good value for this price. Now if we look at the other one, the 417 ES, so this one comes in at 42 mil. It's slightly bigger than the original, which was 39, but because of the lugs, it actually wears very well, and it wears like a 40, so don't be discouraged by the size. And this one comes with a Sellita 510 hand one movement, just like the original. The difference is that the original was a flyback and the new one is not a flyback, most likely to keep the cost down, and Hanhart wanted to be able to offer this to watch enthusiasts without, you know, going overboard with a 10K chronograph. But this one, they were able to increase the power reserve to 58 hours. And using the hand one movement, they were able to keep the watch pretty thin. So it's only 11.55 millimeter thin without the crystal, and with the crystal is only 13.3. The second reason why I think you should consider Hanhart chronograph reissues is that they represent neo-vintage done right. Those reissues are very respectful or faithful and stay as close to the original as possible. Now, of course, they are not 100% because Caliber 40 and 41 and 42 are no longer being manufactured, and it wouldn't make commercial sense to restart production on these. But except for the movement, they really made the effort to go out and reproduce as much of it as possible. So, for example, they use, you know, the historical logo on both of the Mk1 and the 417. They use the historical logo on the case back of the 417 to keep the same case back as the original. They went out and found the same fonts that they use for the numerals or for the inscriptions on the dial. So for example, you will find 23 jewels or shockproof on the 417 ES, which is the same as the original one. You know, Most importantly, they re-released those models with no date. They also offer, bigger versions of the Mark 1 as a date version, but if you really want to stay true to the original, they keep it as no date. Also the dial colors, for example, they only offer the Mark 1 in black or in beige. Just like the original, the black one was for the Luftwaffe pilots and the beige one was for naval officers. They don't go out and follow the trend and make a blue one or green one. I'm looking at you, Longines, with a big eye. Now, the Longines big eye, nothing wrong with it. It looks great in blue, but it's a very contemporary look, which has nothing to do with the historical big eye. So Hanhart doesn't do that. Now, they made a collaboration model with Revolution that's made of bronze, and that's probably the only departure to the historically correct vintage models, because one was in steel, like I said, and one was in chrome-plated brass, and when they aged, the chrome will flake off and you will see the brass, and it kind of looks like bronze, but it's not bronze. So I think that's the only reissue that they made with Revolution that kind of follows the bronze trend. Now you also look at the movement, for example. I've already talked about this, but the fact that they re-engineered the movement so that the pusher would be exactly in the same position as the original Mark 1 pusher is a testament to the effort that they made to reproduce a watch that was really faithful to the original. And I mean, come on, only the collectors would care about this. And finally, the third reason why I think you should consider Hanhart chronograph reissues is that this is a brand that listens to and speaks to the seasoned collector. To me, Hanhart is a little bit like Zinn, and it's a brand that's about, humble and honest and unpretentious, good quality German watchmaking. This is a brand that offers good value for the money and without going crazy on pricing when they reissue one of the historical models. So I think this is a brand that no one will buy unless they know what they are buying. This is why I think this is for the seasoned collector. This is not about hype. This is not about status. This is not about buying a Daytona or Batman or Hulk just because everybody knows what it is and how much it costs. When you buy a 417 ES or you buy a Mark 1, you're buying because you know the history and you know why you're buying it. And I love that about Hanhart. This is kind of a well-kept secret within the watch community that if you see someone who's wearing a 417 ES in the street, then you know he's a real watch collector, not a poser. So these three reasons represent why I love Hanhart and why I think they represent such a great buy at the €2,000 level or possibly even less, and what you're getting for that price. Even if you don't have Patek level money, it doesn't mean you cannot get a collection-worthy chronograph for entry-level prices. Would you consider Hanhart? Did you know them? Does it make you tick? So let me know what you think in the comments. Please, click share and like this video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.